don't see myself yet. There I am. Hello everyone, I'm back. No one showed up yet here, so I'm waiting for a few of you. Sunday again, I'm trying to do more of these live streams so I really enjoy speaking to some of you. Well, I enjoy speaking to all of you really. And so I'm trying to do more of these live streams. Now, some people are showing up. Hello people. Hi everyone, how are you? Very nice to see everyone. I hope most of you have seen the latest video. I'm not expecting you to have watched it yet, of course, but well, less than an hour ago, I posted the new video, which is on astrology in the early Islamic world as part of a collaboration with Angela Puka from the channel Angela Symposium. She's a wonderful scholar and expert on all things occult and esotericism, shamanism, and also things like astrology, like I also say in the video. So really an honor to collaborate with people like Angela. We did a collaboration last year too about Sufism actually, and so it's really great to be able to work together again. As I've said in other videos before, I really, this is one of the best things about what we're doing here on YouTube, I think, is creating this community of collaborators who can work together and bring you this kind of content. I really feel privileged to be able to do that with all of these talented people. Is the volume low again? Because it's basically on full blast right now, I think. Yep. Not much else I can do. So you'll have to make do with this for now, I think. Volume is fine. Okay, good. Khadija asks if I check my Twitter messages. I actually don't. I check messages from people that I already follow or that we follow each other, but I don't really keep up with messages from people that you know, the message requests essentially, for various reasons. If you want to reach out to me, you can send me an email or contact me in some other way. Okay, so as you can tell from the title too, this is actually pretty important, of course. Forgot to mention this, is that just a few days ago, we reached 300,000 subscribers. So again, I can't keep repeating the same things again, but I am truly just in awe, and I'm really honored that so many of you seem to be interested in my videos. So thank you all so much. Thank you to everyone who subscribes and everyone who watches, everyone who I collaborate with. This is such a wonderful experience to be able to do this, like do these videos and do things that I'm passionate about, and also reach an audience to which I can, you know, with which I can talk about these things. It's really the most wonderful thing. I see that Zevi is in the chat. Nice to see you again. And Zevi was so nice, sent me a message congratulating me the other day when I reached 300,000. Zevi is just such an amazing guy. So again, if you're not subscribed to Seekers of Unity, Zevi's channel, then go do that right now. He is really, he's able to straddle that line between really passionate and engaged and also like rigorous academically as well. He is amazing at what he does. I really appreciate Zevi and his channel. So again, thank you all so much for getting us to this point. 300,000, that's a lot of people. That's a lot. That's like bigger than some major cities here in Sweden. So it's really, really strange. But I truly appreciate it. I am free to answer some questions, I guess. And again, I know that a lot of your questions will be regarding what you know, video suggestions and requests for the future. And as I said last time, the answer to most of those questions will be yes. And I won't be able to answer all of those questions right now, but I'll try to answer as many as possible. Did you like the video today on astrology? It's a fascinating topic, and I was only able to scratch the very surface of that tradition, and had to focus really on that, particularly the early Islamic period. Figures like Al-Kindi and Abu Ma'shar. There are others, of course, from that period, but I think that those two are some of the most important, at least in terms of theory. Al-Kindi's ideas about the stellar rays and Abu Ma'shar's writings, which have become so important to later astrology all across the world. Oh, well, not maybe all across the world, but at least in the Middle East and Europe and the Western world, as Angela talks about in her video about astrology in Western esotericism. Kuro Azrem talks about translating videos to other language. I've definitely been thinking about doing that. At least having someone help me out in translating the subtitles, to have subtitles in other languages. That would be really great, because I know there is a huge audience that don't speak English, and that would be really helpful. I just haven't been able to get that project going, but yes, that's something I would really like to do, to be able to reach as many people as possible. Want more videos about Islam? Trishit does. Well, you're in luck. As Islam tends to pop up a lot on this channel. Some people are confused why there's so much Islam on this channel, and that is because that's what I know best. It's the thing that I've focused on and where I have my expertise, or most of my expertise, because that's what I focused on during my studies. During both my bachelor's and master thesis, I studied Islam, and particularly I've studied Sufism. So I know more about those topics, which makes it, I guess, easier to make those videos. Not that it's easy per se, but I have the literature. I know the literature that I will need, and I have a lot of knowledge on that topic already. So that, and also I'm just really interested in that because I have that knowledge already. The more knowledge you have about something, the more interested you are in it, I would say, most of the time at least. So that's the reason why there's so much Islam, is that that's the thing that I know best. But with that said, I tried as much as possible to keep the channel varied, and my aim is to talk about as broad of a spectrum of religious traditions as possible. Pluto, let's do a field trip to Algeria. I would love to go to Algeria at some point. Really, like all of those, like Algeria, I would love to go to Morocco. I was going to go to Morocco actually a few weeks back. That was the plan originally, but because of the pandemic, that wasn't possible. But I would love to go to Algeria for like personal reasons, because it seems beautiful and wonderful in a lot of these places, but also for, of course, the sake of this channel, to gather material and experiences for later content, essentially. Lord Tennyson's Pipe says that my Arabic pronunciation is stellar. Thank you very much. And he asked, would you ever make videos on Buddhism or the debates between Buddhist and Vedanta scholars? Yes. I addressed this question in the last live stream as well. I've been reading up on a lot of Buddhism lately. That's one of those religions that I have had the least amount of knowledge, at least when it comes to the sort of the big major religions of the world. I've had the basic knowledge and a sort of overview of the different schools and ideas, but my knowledge on Buddhism has been, and to some degree still is, somewhat limited, and that's why I haven't covered it yet. But I have been really studying and researching more about Eastern Buddhism, so like Mahayana Buddhism in particular, and the Tiantai school of Buddhism, which has this fascinating idea about the three truths. So Mahayana Buddhism and the philosophy of Nagarjuna, for example, has this idea of the two truths, the two-truth theory. The Tiantai Buddhists have the three-truth theory, which is so like Buddhism, again, which a lot of people might not expect, but Buddhism is one of like the most deep and complex and like developed philosophical traditions in the world, probably. And also to compare Buddhist philosophy and ideas to Vedanta would be really fascinating too. A lot of people have already done that, I think, but yes, I would love to talk about that. John Commander, what's your name? My name is Philip, is my name. Shadab Tahir asks, do you practice Sufism or a disciple of any certain Sufi order? I am not initiated in any Sufi order or any lineage of Sufi, any lineage of Sufism. Although I have spent a lot of time with Sufis and in Sufi gatherings and with Sufi practitioners and participated in that kind of thing for, when I did field work for my master's thesis, for example. So I've been in those environments, but I'm not initiated in a Sufi order as such. Curry Aficionado, great name, asks, why do even atheistic ideologies like communism assume the shape and form of religion? I don't know. Maybe that's just part of like the way that humans organize themselves. Something about the sociology of social organization or something. I don't know. I would assume that humans have a tendency to create similar structures around a certain ideology or an identity, because, as I've said, I tend to be sociologically inclined when it comes to religion, like a Durkheimian kind of perspective that religion is primarily about identity and belonging and so on. Not that that's like exclusively what religion is about, but like on a societal level, I tend to be in line with those kinds of ideas. Osman Zahid asks, how do you deal with existential crisis? That depends. Well, I'm not a psychologist, so if you're having trouble with that kind of or if you have an existential crisis or you have anxiety or anything, then you should speak to a professional and not listen to some random YouTuber. But I think it depends on what is troubling you, I guess. One thing that has really helped me with various problems mentally and psychologically over the years is the classic thing of exposure. I don't know if that's what it's called in English, but basically like facing your fears. Like really, if you're afraid of something, the best antidote is to just walk up to that fear and just stare it in the face. And that's the first step to getting rid of that kind of thing. Suspicious Mind, is it snowing in Sweden? Not currently, I think. There's a storm here. But I haven't seen any snow. I haven't left my apartment today because of the storm, so I haven't really, I don't know. I might take a trip to the convenience store after I finish the stream, but no, there is snow on the ground, but it isn't snowing. It was snowing the other week. Trishitas, do you think Sufism follows Quran? Yeah, I mean, the whole tradition of Sufism is essentially based on the same sources that any other Islamic tradition is based on, which is the Quran and the Hadith literature and the law schools and all this. Definitely, at least they consider themselves to be following the Quran. They read the same Quran, and they see their tradition as being completely in line with that and as a correct understanding of the Quran. It's not that Sufis, at least most Sufis, that they sort of see themselves as coming from some other tradition and then pretending to be Muslims. It's really, they understand themselves as being the deepest and most authentic version of Islam. And from a sort of academic and neutral perspective, the way we look at religious identification and religious affiliation is that if someone calls themselves a Muslim, then they're Muslim. We have to operate from that perspective, because we don't get involved in like theological discussions about who's a heretic or who's reading the Quran correctly. That's completely irrelevant to the academic study of religions. And from that perspective, Sufis are definitely Muslims, and they definitely follow the Quran. I would say the majority of them, at least, per the fact that they consider themselves to be doing that. Abdullah Ahmed, I think Ibn Hazm would make a great video. Have you studied his life and ideas at all? Yes, Ibn Hazm is fascinating. Ibn Hazm was an Andalusian, polymath. He was a theologian and philosopher and jurist and all kinds of things, who lived around the turn of the last millennium, so around the year 1000. And he, fascinatingly, belongs to the Zahiri school of law, which has mostly died out. It's not part of the four main law schools. And the Zahiri school is characterized by a strict literalism. So they read the scriptures very literally, and they don't take much. I'm not an expert on Zahiri methodology, but they essentially take the scriptures and they try to add as little as possible to what it says. And what's so fascinating about Ibn Hazm is that you would think that from a modern perspective, you would think that would make him really fundamentalist or really strict or rigid, but it's actually in a lot of cases the opposite. Ibn Hazm, through his literalism, actually has pretty, what we would call, liberal ideas. I think, don't quote me on this now because I can't remember the source, but I'm pretty sure that he, for example, considered it forbidden to force women to cover their faces, because to him there was no basis for that in any of the scriptures. So Ibn Hazm is really fascinating that he goes against a lot of assumptions about what we would think about a literalist kind of approach to religion. And I would definitely want to make a video about him in the future. Yusuf Ali, yes, he was also, I wouldn't say one of the few scholars, but yes, he's one of those examples of scholars who does consider music to be completely allowed in Islam too. So Ibn Hazm, really, really fascinating figure. Also probably a huge influence on Ibn Arabi and his methodology for reading the Quran, which is also contrary to what many people might assume. Ibn Arabi is actually quite a literalist reader of the Quran. Of course, he thinks that every Quranic verse has deeper layers and a bunch of different deeper interpretations and so on. But in terms of the outer layer and the meaning of the text, he's very much a literalist, which a lot of people don't expect. And he probably gets a lot of those ideas and methodologies from Ibn Hazm, who after all is from the same region of Spain, only a century before. I saw some questions. For example, Asiful, what is the difference between Salafism and Wahhabism? That's a very good question, and I want to cover that in a future video because that's a whole thing. In very, very general terms, Wahhabism, which is a term that others apply to this group that we call Wahhabis, they don't like that term themselves. They actually see that as quite controversial, or actually quite offensive, a lot of them. They call themselves the Muwahhidun, I think, the monotheists, and a lot of groups call themselves the Muwahhidun, so it wouldn't be that useful to use that term either. But so the Wahhabis essentially is a group that originates with the teachings of a scholar in Saudi Arabia in the 18th century called Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, who was influenced by people like Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, and was very much a kind of a fundamentalist, not necessarily, without putting any value in that word, just factually, objectively, he was a fundamentalist in the sense that he saw himself as bringing Islam back to some kind of pure version and wanted to do away with all kinds of innovations like Shiism and Sufism and things like that. And Wahhabism is also the ideology and theology and so on that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has adopted to a large degree, because the Saud family, who rules Saudi Arabia today, was close. They worked together essentially with Abdul Wahhab in the 18th century. Now, Salafism, you could say, is a movement that emerged. Now, Salafis themselves will, of course, say that they are just the original version of Islam, of the companions of the Prophet. But in terms of a religious movement, they originate primarily, I think, in the 20th century, I would say, in certain reform movements of trying to modernize Islam and to do away with what they saw as superstition, like Sufism and things like that. And instead, again, this notion of going back to the pure version of Islam practiced by the Salaf as-Salih, the pious predecessors. And this reform movement is associated with people like Muhammad Abdu and his student Rashid Rida. And Rida is very important for the establishment of Salafism. And so it's a complicated thing, but Wahhabis, I've heard people say that all Wahhabis are Salafis, but not all Salafis are Wahhabis. Because the Salafi approach is essentially the same in a lot of ways as the Wahhabi approach, but the Wahhabis have a certain theology and legal methodology that not all Salafis follow. It's complicated. I'll leave that discussion to a future video, essentially. What's my favorite David Bowie album? I really like Low. I think is really cool. It's just so dark, especially the second half of that album. I also really like his last album too, Black Star. I thought was really wonderful. And just like the whole thing about like him knowing that he was going to die, and like, yeah, it's also, I like dark stuff apparently because that's a really dark album too because of that whole story surrounding it. But I think it's really beautiful music. So let me scroll up a bit, see if I can find. Again, Curry Aficionado wants me to comment on what I think happens after we die. And the answer is I don't know. And anyone who says differently, I think one should be careful with. If they say they know for sure, like we can have ideas and things we believe, but no one knows for sure. That's my perspective on it. Michael Muller, did you study music formally? No, actually, I'm mostly self-taught, actually. I've played music in various constellations and ways over the years and learned, like I don't know much theory, for example, and that's probably as a result of not studying music formally, but I've sort of learned theory gradually over the years as I've been playing music with people who have been a lot more talented than me. I appreciate that you like the music that I make. For those of you who don't know, I've started posting more on my other channel, which is simply called Philip Holm, which is my name. And that channel is going to be primarily dedicated to music. And so I will do music. I put my own music on there, but I also do videos that are somewhat similar to the videos on here. I just did one on an instrument called the duduk, which is a wind instrument from the Central Asian Anatolian region. And I will be making videos about various topics related to music. So a video coming up is going to be about the Indian musician Tansen, who was a musician in the court of the Emperor Akbar. And so I'll be making videos on that channel that I don't think really fits on Let's Talk Religion because there's no clear connection to religion in that sense. So if you're interested in that kind of content about music, then you can go check out that other channel too. It's down at the bottom of this channel's main page are some links to that. Mujahid Ali, which religion do you think best? I'm assuming you mean which religion I think is the best one, and I don't have an answer to that question because I don't have a religion that I think is the best. I think it's hard to study religions as broadly as we do and in the way that we do, and to see the historical developments of all these religions, and then to have an opinion that one of those has exclusive right to being true. It just doesn't add up to me. So I there's no religion I consider to be the best one. Yes, Bilal, I'm going to talk about the Chishti order, definitely. There is an exciting video coming up in which the Chishti order will be an important part, and that is a video that I'm doing about Sufi music. And it's probably going to be one of the most ambitious videos that I've ever done. The script is long. It's almost as long, if not as long, actually, as my video on Ibn Arabi. Something about 24 pages or something. So that's one of the next videos I'm going to do, and the Chishti order is very important for that. And because that's going to be a long video, probably extend to like around an hour long if I were to guess, you're going to have to give me some extra time to work on that one. So there might be silence for like 2-3 weeks, and we'll see how long that takes. Hello, Andrew. Religion for Breakfast is in the chat. Thank you so much, Andrew. And thank you for being a great inspiration, for creating wonderful content, and for giving me the honor of collaborating with you as well on the Gnosticism video. Thank you so much. And again, if I'm assuming a lot of you know about Andrew's channel, Religion for Breakfast, and if you don't, then what are you even doing here? You should go right now and subscribe and check out his videos. One of the best channels about religion on all of YouTube, and a huge inspiration to the stuff that I do as well. Yes, Andrew, I agree. The kind of channels that we're doing, like you and me and Justin and Angela and all these people seem to gain an increasing audience, and that's really exciting to see, because I think that's a really good sign that that people are interested in like trustworthy and actually good content about religion, and that if it reaches a wider audience, then religious literacy will increase as well, and that's really what we're after at the end of the day. Any videos about Lord Shiva? Definitely. I'm really excited to be, I'm looking forward to making a video or several videos about the Shaivite traditions and Kashmir Shaivism, for example. And I've started working on some of those scripts, one of those scripts. So you can look forward to that also in the future. Pluto is a planet. Do you meditate? I do, but I've been really bad at keeping up that practice lately. I think it's a wonderful way to, for various reasons. Egon, Hindu and Buddhist, is it true that ancient Germanic peoples believed in monotheism? One god in many forms. I read on Wikipedia that they were monotheistic, similar to the concept of Brahman in Hinduism. I don't know that much about the religions of ancient Germanic peoples, so I can't really comment on that. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a kind of concept of a singular divine being or principle that tends to be pretty common in what we call polytheistic religions. In like the Aztec religion, we have this concept of Teot, which is a kind of oneness. I don't know enough about that to speak on it at any length either, but the same is true for Brahman, like you said, for Many Egyptologists will also argue that ancient Egypt also had that kind of idea, that there are many gods, but that there is a singular one god or divine principle of which these other deities are just manifestations. Other scholars disagree about that, though, so it's a debate that still isn't settled, so to say. But in terms of the Germanic peoples, I really don't know, which maybe I should, because that's a lot closer to where I live geographically. But I haven't gotten there yet. Hopefully in the future. IA, are religions man-made? From the perspective, from like a scholarly academic perspective, that we approach religions as human phenomena, and religious, in terms of organized or institutionalized religions, as human sociological creations, essentially, yes. There are other there are actual scholars with PhDs in the chat, so if I say something that is inaccurate, then they can probably correct me too. Let's see, I saw a question. Ahmed Hazem, have you got hate comments for creating these contents? I mean, I think it's inevitable that some people get upset over a topic that is as sensitive and can be as controversial as religion. So yeah, I've definitely had people be upset and write that kinds of comments. I tend to not, like, doesn't bother me because I expected that when I started the channel, but there's never been anything like serious, except maybe once. Yeah, I think in general I'm really surprised over how positive most of the reactions and the comments on the videos are when one considers the subject that I talk about. I would expect there to be a lot more negative kinds of discussions and comments, and that they are there, of course, but it's a lot less than I would have expected. So I'm really glad that I have such a appreciative audience. Joey asks if I'm a negative person. I wouldn't say so. I think I'm pretty positive. I enjoy life. I think I have a generally positive outlook on my life and the world. MySalon22, I was introduced to your channel yesterday. Where should I start from? I think it'd be good to start from some of the more academically oriented videos. There's a video on essentialism, which talks about the way that we approach religions from a historical or from an academic perspective, of not essentializing or creating monoliths, but recognizing the internal diversity and the fact that religions evolve and change over time. So like essentially just recognizing that from a neutral perspective, right, religions are this incredibly diverse and multifaceted things that can never really be portrayed as a monolith or as anything fixed in that way, at least not to any major degree. And I think it's good to have that perspective before starting to actually study the different traditions that I talk about. That's the way I also structure the release schedule for the podcast. So again, for those of you who don't know, I just started a Let's Talk Religion podcast, which is just really old episodes that I upload as in audio form. And the schedule for that begins with those videos. So the video on essentialism, and then a video about what belief is, like why, I think it's called Why Do People Believe? And then I go into the like what is Zoroastrianism or what is Mandaism and so on. I think that's a good way to approach studying this topic. Justin's here. Justin is a good friend and an amazing guy. And I look forward to seeing his channel grow as much and to see him reach the same amount of audience as amazingly we now have too. He really deserves that. And I look forward to doing more collaborations with Justin over at Esoterica too. Sledgehammer. Is that a reference to the Peter Gabriel song? Because if so, then I approve. Remus Said, do I know Arabic? I think I get this question every time I do a live stream. I do know, I've studied Arabic. I studied Arabic for a year at university. And of course, I've picked up on Arabic and studied Arabic while studying like Islam and so on. So I know a little Arabic. I can read Arabic, like simple Arabic, like simple text. Fusha, essentially, I don't know much in terms of the dialects, but I can read al-Fusha, and especially if I have a dictionary with me, I can get through some of the more advanced text too. But in terms of like speaking Arabic, not really. I'm not fluent in that sense, but I know a little Arabic. I get by. Joey Paisano again asks, do you experience joy? Yeah, I experience joy in situations where it feels appropriate to experience joy. I don't think that striving to always experience joy is a good thing. That's not something I would want. I wouldn't want to feel joy all the time, partly because then it wouldn't be special, but also because I think as humans we are more inclined to be like nervous and anxious, and so like joy is a great feeling, but the best feeling to me really is when you're like just content, which sounds dark maybe, but just this feeling of just nothing. I like those kinds of days or moments. But joy is wonderful too, when it is, again, when it's appropriate. My native language is Swedish. I was born in Stockholm and I still live in Stockholm, and I speak Swedish for the most part, except when I do these videos. Mullah Sadra, Mona Izadi, yes, Mullah Sadra. I have now sort of laid the groundwork for that, because if we want to talk about Mullah Sadra, we first need to talk about Ibn Sina, and we need to talk about Ibn Arabi, and we need to talk about Suhrawardi, because Mullah Sadra bases his whole philosophy on those three philosophers, and then his whole philosophy sprouts from that. And so if you don't have a background knowledge in those three, then you'll have a harder time understanding Mullah Sadra. Now I've made 3 videos on those figures, and so I'm ready to do Mullah Sadra video. I might want to redo the Ibn Sina video though, because that was one of the first ones I did, and I don't like it's not like I disagree with anything I say there, but I can definitely do a better one, like more in depth and longer. But the Mullah Sadra video is approaching, definitely. I love these like really deep philosophical questions. Why I asked, why do we suffer, and why is there evil? I don't know really. I can speak for some of the ideas of the people I talk about, some of the philosophers and theologians. The constantly recurring figure on this channel is Ibn Arabi, and he essentially adopts the idea of the Neoplatonists, people like Plotinus, that sees darkness essentially as the absence of, did I say darkness? He sees evil as the absence of good, just like darkness is the absence of light. And so Ibn Arabi says that, well, everything is God, right? In one sense, at least, it is a reflection of God. Everything that is evil, everything that is negative, right? That's a result of nothingness, of non-being, that which is not God. So the absence of God is evil, because the world is in this place of the barzakh, the isthmus, the line in between absolute being, which is God, and non-being or nothingness. And the world stands at the very line between these two worlds. And so it contains elements of both. And so he explains it that everything that is evil is a result of nothingness and non-being. And everything else is from God or from light in that sense. I think that's a very poetic way of looking at it. I don't know if I ascribe to it myself, but that's been a recurring idea, at least, of how to answer that question. It's a very difficult question, one of the most difficult questions. Jai Shri Ram, are you religious? What do you mean by religious then? If you mean, I'm not going to answer this question. I'm going to stay esoteric. But if you mean in a traditional sense of being religious in the way that people tend to refer to that term, I think many of you would consider me not religious. But it's also more complicated than that. So maybe in some future video or live stream I can talk about that more in depth, but probably not. There are some things I just I want to keep to myself. Yes, the Stay Esoteric thing wasn't a conscious reference to the Schwepp podcast, but I've been listening a lot to that, so maybe it was like an unconscious slip of the tongue. Check out Earl Fontenelle's podcast called The Secret History of Western Esotericism. It's amazing stuff. Skullo, is that how you want me to pronounce your name? Have you experienced any supernatural events in your life? Not as much as I would have wanted to. I would love to have some supernatural experiences, but I've been not really. I've had experiences that some would perhaps term mystical, perhaps, or at least mildly mystical experiences, but not like not anything in extreme, nothing I would call a supernatural experience. But again, I would love to. That would be really interesting. Also, Zevi, 3-way collab on Maimonides and mysticism. I'm down. I'm totally down. I still haven't read the full translation of the Guide for the Perplexed. But I really want to do a video about Abraham Maimonides, Maimonides' son, who was he a Kabbalist? I don't know, but he created this kind of syncretistic movement of Sufism and Judaism, which is really exciting. And I have that as like a video on my list that I really want to do. Maybe we could like work something out. In any case, I'm definitely down to do a collab like that. Mahdi Hosseini asks if I've ever considered LSD. I mean, I've considered it. It's been I mean, in the sense that like, yeah, it's been something that's come up in discussions in my life, but I've never taken LSD. No. These are some of these questions I'm just gonna keep private. Samir Alam, is religious literacy important in today's world? I think it's very important because religions are it's a hugely important factor in society, in politics, in all kinds of, in culture. Like religion is all over the place and it influences us in more ways than we understand. And so if there was more religious literacy, if people knew more about different religions, about the topic of religion in general sense, I think that would only benefit us in many different ways. It's sad that so many government institutions are reluctant to hire experts on religion, at least here in Sweden. Like the Department of Defense essentially has no interest in hiring people like that. They want to hire people who are experts in military stuff, which you'd think like, do they need that? Because that's kind of their thing already. But anyway, I definitely think that we need more religious studies institutions. We need more religious literacy, and we need more experts on religion to advise politicians and political institutions. So yes. Fidelio, what impressed you most about the Quran? Well, the Quran is really the Quran is a really beautiful book. If you read it in Arabic, right? If you listen to the Quran recited, or even if you just read it in the Arabic, it's incredibly poetic, right? It is. I mean, it isn't. Muslims will say it's not poetry, it's something else, but it's very poetic. It rhymes, it has this meter and this just rhythm that's incredible. So regardless of like the nature of the Quran, where it comes from, it's hard to deny that it's an amazing document and it's an amazing piece of writing. Just in terms of the beauty of its language and its poetry, I think it's really impressive. Edward Noguera, what are the funniest assumptions people have made about you, whether your religion or country of residence? Good question. I was once accused of being an agent for the PKK. That was pretty funny. I don't know. People on the internet assume a lot of weird things a lot of the time. That's the one thing that came to mind. Just this completely baseless claim because I don't know, because I talked about Kurdish religion or something. I don't know. Kid TRQ, do you think Islam is very influenced by Judaism? Well, yes, but So that's a complex topic, because definitely, of course, Islam develops out of an Abrahamic context, including Judaism and early Christianity and so on. But Muslims themselves will, of course, say that, well, Islam is the original religion, and Judaism and Christianity have branched off from that original religion. So that's their perspective on that. They would say that no, Islam wasn't influenced by Judaism, but Judaism was influenced by Islam. Putting that aside, just looking at Islam as like this, assuming that Islam arrives with the Prophet Muhammad, right? From a historical, critical perspective, then I guess yes, because it grows out of an Abrahamic religious tradition. Danish Rahim, can you make a list of all your books and share that list? That would be a really long list, but I think I might I know that Justin Sledge did a video about where he basically like gave a tour of his bookshelves. I could do something like that. My bookshelf or my book collection is not nearly as large as his, although he is at least a few years older than me, so I can use that as an excuse. But maybe I could do something like that. If you're interested. I don't know if that would be very interesting. Samir Karki, thoughts on Rumi? I love Rumi. I love Rumi. I haven't made videos on Rumi because everyone loves Rumi. Everyone knows Rumi. Rumi is one of the most famous poets in history. He's one of the most popular poets in America. Now, of course, many people have read, questionable translations of Rumi that often will take out all of his connections to Islam, essentially. And so there's, I think, value in countering that and really showing an accurate picture of Rumi as the Muslim thinker that he was, the Muslim poet that he was. But even that, there's a lot of content about that too, books and videos and so on. So, but it's inevitable that there will be a video about Rumi at some point. Rhubarb pie, what's your favorite kind of apple? I like red apples. I don't know why. I'm not a big fan of apples generally. I like the taste of apples, but I don't like eating actual apples. I think it's the ickiness. That's I think I have some kind of phobia of being, what's the word in English? Like having stuff on my hands that shouldn't be there. And like fruits and apples have a lot of juice, and I don't like that. But I love things that taste like apple. Justin has a very interesting question. What's your favorite religious headgear? Oh, wow. The Pope has a pretty awesome hat. Hard to beat. I don't know. You're asking questions that are way too good that I would need to think about. What's interesting is that different Sufi orders have often characteristic headgear. So the Qadri order will have like a certain headgear that they use. The Mevlevi order has the very famous, very tall headgear that they use. Oh yeah, Coptic Orthodox folks, definitely. Also good. I was speaking of the Sufi headgear, I was at a museum in Istanbul, the Mevlevi Museum, if any of you have been there. And there was this room that essentially like had these different headgears from different Sufi orders on display, which is probably only interesting if you're actually interested in Sufism to begin with. But to me, that was really interesting. Usman Zahid, thoughts on Neoplatonism. I have complex thoughts about Neoplatonism. I admire Plotinus hugely, and I love the Enneads, and I think he, not only is he and his followers hugely influential in so many ways, but I just think he's a brilliant thinker, a brilliant philosopher, and like such a fascinating personality, it seems like. So I'm a huge fan of Plotinus and the Neoplatonists. That isn't to say that I agree with everything they say or that I buy everything, but yes, check out the Enneads by Plotinus if you want to be blown away. The estate of who have you done a video on Gershom Scholem? I haven't done a video about him in particular, but I've done videos where he's come up and been a significant part of those videos. I did a video with Dr. Justin Sledge about a year ago about Abraham Abulafia, in which he is an important part. That's probably one of, like, you know, I think all videos are good in various ways, but my video on Abulafia is one of those videos that I'm especially proud of for some reason. I watched it again a few weeks ago, and I just feel like I did a good job on that one. And having it be a collaboration with Justin is also especially great. A lot of questions, guys. Pluto's a planet. What's your zodiac sign? I addressed this last week also. I'm a Capricorn. I was taught that I was a Capricorn as a kid. I'm born on December 22nd. And so I was taught that I was a Capricorn, but then once I checked a few years later, I was something else, the one that's before that. I just released a video on astrology and I don't even know the names of the signs. That's not the part I've focused on during my research. But needless to say, aside from studying that stuff for these videos and as part of my religious studies, astrology has never really been a part of my life or anything that I've considered like that. Remus Said, how are you? Are you okay? I'm doing fine. I'm doing well. I really enjoy everything that I do. I have a day job that I feel is really meaningful and that gives me a lot of energy and feelings of love and appreciation, and being able to do this channel and reach all of you people and talk about religion with all of you wonderful people. It's like I'm really happy about where I am currently, and no other problems right now. I don't have a tummy ache. No headache right now. I do have a dentist appointment on Thursday that I'm not looking forward to, but I did a root canal treatment last week, which is obviously not the most wonderful experience, but you gotta stay stoic about that stuff. Like, it sucks, but it's okay that it sucks. That's my approach. Sucker for Pain asks if I believe in Barzakh life. So in Islam, I assume this is what you mean. So in Islam, the idea is that once you die, you go to this place called the Barzakh, which is an intermediate or sort of middle place where you wait for the eventual day of judgment, where you'll be sent to, heaven or hell, essentially. Do I believe in it? I don't know. So that's it. What's interesting about studying all of these topics is that, of course, a lot of the time you're influenced by what you read, or you you're inspired by what you read. But a lot of the time, you just read these things and you don't even consider asking yourself if you believe in them. So that's one of those things. But like, I know about it. I've seen it a lot of times in different writings and so on. I've never actually asked myself the question, do I believe that this is true? So I don't know. I can't really answer that question. Yeah, kind of like purgatory. Yeah, not really, but it's similar to purgatory. Yes, Ulysses Jonah. Yes, root canal is like purgatory. Yeah, basically, I would agree. It's an hour of torture is too strong a word, but Joseph Enders, have you ever considered doing a video on different atheistic movements throughout history? Yeah. Yes, I've been getting a lot of suggestions to do videos on the Charvaka school of Indian philosophy, for example, which is essentially an atheist school. Really fascinating stuff. And also modern day atheist movement or movements are significant for religion or the discussions about religion in the world today. So none of those videos are in the works right now. And yes, Al-Ram Abul Ala Al-Ma'ari, I was just thinking about him when you said atheist. Now contrary to popular belief, it seems pretty clear to me that Al-Ma'ari wasn't an atheist, although he's often portrayed as one. So Al-Ma'ari was an Arabic poet, a medieval Arabic poet who's really fascinating and controversial. And people tend to say that he was atheist, but he was critical of religious institutions and what many today call organized religion. But he seems to have been quite a pious person himself, judging from his actual poetry. He's, regardless, one of probably the most fascinating figures of that time, at least in terms of the poets, the Arabic poets. He is one of the great ones. And yes, I've definitely been considering doing videos on him, or at least one video. The Rock asks what sources I use for my Ibn Taymiyyah video. The sources are in the description to the video. I always leave my sources as well, sometimes as just suggested readings if you want to know more about the topic. I always leave that stuff in the description to every video. So if you want to know what sources I used for that video in particular, go check that description. I'm not sure how long I'm going to be streaming. I think I'm going for an hour now or something. Yes, about an hour. I can do a little more. It's fun to talk to you guys. So, upcoming videos I have a few ones. The next one is probably going to be the finishing part in the trilogy about Vedanta, specifically talking about Madhva or Madhvacharya and his school, which is known as Dvaita Vedanta. So I already did the one on Shankara and one on Ramanuja and Vishishta Dvaita, and this last one is going to be about Dvaita Vedanta, which is the dualist school of Vedanta. That's basically at the complete opposite spectrum, or opposite side of the spectrum from Advaita, which teaches that all things are the Brahman, like the self is identical with the Brahman. There is only the Brahman. All else is Maya, illusion, which is often misunderstood, but everything else is a superimposition upon the Brahman. Now Madhva and Dvaita Vedanta is very different. He conceives of the Brahman as identical with Vishnu, as a personal god with attributes, and as being different from the self and different from the world. And yet he and that school is also very significant for the history of Vedanta and the tradition of Vedanta. So that's the next video. Then I'm doing, like I said earlier, I'm doing a video about Sufi music, which is one of the most ambitious videos that I've ever done. And I'm going to need a few extra days or weeks to work on that one. The script is done, but the editing is probably going to take a little longer. So that's going to be like a really comprehensive overview of what Sufi music is, like both in terms of practice, like the sama rituals of the Sufis, as well as more theoretical aspects of like how did the Sufi writers and thinkers view music from a psychological, metaphysical, and ontological perspective. It's really, really fascinating stuff, and I've been wanting to do that video for a long time, but it just felt so big and ambitious that I put it off for a long time. But finally now I finished the script, and that's one of the next ones coming out. So those are some of the ones, the upcoming ones. The estate of Ho-Hu. Will you talk about music in Islam in general? I kind of did that. There is a series on the channel called Music in the Islamic World, which is not necessarily about music in Islam, but like music in the Islamic world. And what that means is like made by Muslims and in a context where Islam is the ruling, the religion of the rulers, and the paradigmical cultural, the majority religion essentially, right? So I have a series in 2 parts about music in the Islamic world you can check out, and this next one will be particularly about Sufi, this music of the Sufis. Mohammed Aniq, are you familiar with René Guénon and Abdul Hakim Murad Winter? I'm familiar with both of them. I made very recently a video about the Shadili Sufi order, in which René Guénon is a significant part, representing the sort of later Western or European developments of that order, and the perennial philosophy, the school of the perennial philosophy. Tim Winter, or Abdul Hakim Murad, hasn't shown up in a video except as a source, because he has edited and written great stuff about Islamic history and theology. But he is a person that I admire a lot. I think he's a wonderful speaker, and he seems to be a great scholar. Christos Nicolaou, do you know any good sources on Yarshanism? Not really, because I've been wanting to study that further, and it's been hard for me to find good sources about that. Like, I do know people who are connected to the to Yarshanism, which is also known as the Ali Haq, which is a religious movement that originates in, I think, in what is today Iran, right? Also often associated with Kurdish ethnicity. it's on my list of to-do things, but I've also had trouble finding like reliable sources. So sorry, I can't give you recommendations at this time, but as soon as I find them, I'll try to let you know. Mu'taz Dawood, was Ibn Arabi influenced by the various Indian philosophers? I don't think so personally. I see very little reason to think that he was directly influenced by Indian philosophies or Hinduism or Advaita Vedanta or anything like that. I think any similarities to that comes either from just, I don't know, I think those similarities come from a lot of the, if anything, in terms of an outside influence, I think it comes from an interpretation of Neoplatonist ideas. But also, I think, in my opinion, I think there is something to be said for a kind of common human experience that Ibn Arabi and Meister Eckhart and Shankara and these people seem to experience things that are very similar. And you could trace that to some kind of intellectual, development and influence, but I think we shouldn't discard the idea that there might be some kind of common human experience that can be reached and that have been reached by these people that has a certain character that all these people tend to express, but in different ways in terms of different religious symbolism and languages. Now, that isn't to say necessarily that those experiences are true or that, they correspond to anything in terms of an absolute reality or anything like that, but that these experiences can be had and that they have certain characteristics that are common. Even today, you hear people who, take LSD or mushrooms and things, and they also describe these things in very similar ways. That could be a result of the fact that they have already, heard these stories before and then they project that onto their experience, but, who knows? But I think, again, one shouldn't discard the idea that maybe there's just a common human experience that all these people are tapping into somehow. Maybe some psychological, or it could be a biological thing or something else. I don't know. So Egon again asks me if, a lot of question marks. Is it true? Let's see. Is it true that originally both Hinduism and Christianity believers prayed 3 times every day? I think you're going to have to stop spamming that question. It seems to be bothering some other people in the chat, but I'll gladly answer your question. I've never, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't heard of anything like that, which maybe I should have. Is Andrew still in the chat? Maybe he can enlighten us about early Christian prayer customs, because I'm not entirely sure. Elmo player, what's your favorite food? Like, I've never had favorites. Whether it's, food or it's movies or it's music. I've never really had like favorite things. Like, I've had things that I like more than others, but like I've never had, I shouldn't say never, but for most of my life, I've never had like, this is my favorite movie or this is my favorite band or artist or anything. It depends on what mood I'm in. Are you enjoying this silence? We're being silent together. It's a meditational practice of... I'm just kidding. I'm just trying to look for good questions to answer. Nadir Bengana, why do you think Sweden is no religious? Why do I think Sweden isn't religious? Well, I don't know if it's true that Sweden or Swedes aren't religious. I think we're religious. This is a difficult term. What does religious even mean? Does that mean adhering to a specific religious institution? Or does that mean, in a sort of old-fashioned way, like E.B. Tyler kind of definition of religion as being believing in supernatural things? Like, what does religious mean? There's fascinating studies being done by my old professor, David Turfjell, as well as many others, that focus on this in particular, like the new, religiosity or spirituality of Swedish people, as well as other people in the secularized West, that definitely seem to indicate that people still, people still believe in things, and they still place themselves within a kind of worldview that reminds us of what we call religions, right? So, for example, nature. A lot of Swedes will say that, well, nature is my religion, or, they will go out into nature, and that's a kind of religious practice, a religious experience. There's this thing called forest bathing, which originally comes from Japan, but it's become really popular in Europe and the West, where it's a kind of therapy to just go walking in the woods and doing that as a kind of spiritual practice. So I wouldn't say that Swedes are not religious. Take into consideration the many problems with that term. I think it's just that the way that people are religious is changing, as it always is. So people in Sweden don't, for example, follow or adhere to the major religious institutions or organizations in the same way that they used to. That's true. That's true for a lot of places in the secularized, in Europe, for example. But there's a lot more complexity to that question than that. Jay Bristow, are there any modern Islamic philosophers you think are worth mentioning? I think so. There are a number of significant ones. In my Shadley video, I mentioned Sayyid Hossein Nasr. He, I think, is a very significant philosopher and thinker and figure in the Islamic world today. Like we already mentioned, Abdul Hakim Murad is very significant. You have people like Hamza Yusuf, Omid Safi. These are people that I'm extra familiar with because they're also involved in academia, for example, as scholars in a more broad sense. In terms of philosophers, what's his name? There's a really interesting guy. I think he's in Malaysia. He lives in Malaysia. Whoa, I forget his name. I can post a comment later or something with a list of interesting Islamic. Yes, Al-Attas, that's who I was thinking about. He's really interesting too. Egon, did Mayans and Aztecs believe in one god in many forms too? Well, the Aztecs, they have, this pantheon of different gods, and, the study of Aztec and Mesoamerican religions are still in its infancy in a lot of ways. But it seems that they had many gods who represented, natural phenomena or things like that. But that there's also this concept in Aztec religion, what's known as the Teot, which seems to be this kind of, almost pantheistic idea of a oneness, a divinity that is the sort of the one reality of all other things, and that the other gods are, again, like manifestations of this one concept. Also kind of recurring theme in a lot of religious traditions. The Maya, I'm not sure. I think Andrew made videos about both the Maya and Aztec religions, and he mentioned in the Maya episode that there might be a similar concept, but that there's still like debate over how accurate that is. I'm in no way an expert on Mesoamerican religion yet, but there's some fascinating research that's being done there. We've been going for almost, so I'm going to do like an hour and a half. Maybe I'll do 10 more minutes or so, and then we'll call it a day. I've been working on a setup in here for the videos on the other channel, the Philip Holm channel, which is dedicated to music primarily. Just having the camera, like you're not seeing the video camera right now, but there's a camera here. You have the instruments in the background, which is making the filming of videos for that channel a lot more effortless than for this channel, which allows me to be more productive, which I think is wonderful. Baroness Elsa von Freytag Loringhoven. Wow, amazing name. Is there a place and time in history you would travel to if you could? I would like, there are interesting things. I give such boring answers. It's always like, well, I would like to visit every time and place, but that's really that's true. Like every time and place has something interesting, except certain parts of Europe during the plague, perhaps. Maybe I wouldn't. I'd skip that, I think. But other than that, like, I don't know, Alexandria in the first couple of centuries AD would be really interesting. Obviously because that's such a big part of what I do. I would love to, be in Judea around the time of Jesus, or, Mecca and Medina during the time of Prophet Muhammad, or, Andalusia in the later Middle Ages, southern Spain, and so on. DJ Bano, which do you prefer to read, the Bible or Quran? I'm not going to answer that. There's no answer to that. That wouldn't be controversial. I like reading both. They're both fascinating documents. I know Arabic, so I enjoy reading the Quran in Arabic, even though I don't understand everything, but like I can appreciate reading the Quran in Arabic and appreciating the rhythm and the poetry of that. But I also really enjoy reading the Bible in translation because of the incredible history and stories in that book, or in those books. Mohammed Goma, are you familiar with Peter Adamson? Yes, I'm an avid listener to the History of Philosophy Without Any Gaps It's just one of the best podcasts for the history of philosophy. It's by a professor, I think, called Peter Adamson, who's based in Munich. And again, that's also I highly recommend that podcast if you're interested in knowing about the history of philosophy. And it really doesn't leave anything out. So a very common way to talk about the history of philosophy has been to basically cover the pre-Socratics, and then, you know, Plato and Aristotle and the Hellenistic schools, the Stoics and so on. And then from there, like maybe Augustine, like that might be like possibly you could go that far. And then you like skip to Descartes, which is like 1,000 years. And so that's one of the points of that podcast, which is also in the name, is, you know, the history of philosophy without any gaps, that he is including and filling those gaps. You know, the late antiquity, the Islamic philosophers, and all of that, which is really, really important for the history of philosophy. The Middle Ages in the Islamic world or in Europe was not some, you know, there were no dark ages in that sense of, you know, a completely intellectually dry period. You know, the Middle Ages in Europe was incredibly fruitful, and there were a lot of really original and new philosophies and ideas and science being developed. And so I think it's important to highlight that as well. There's been a lot of stuff about medieval thinkers and philosophers on this channel, partly for the same reason, that I think that they are so often neglected, and there's a kind of general, you know, misrepresentation of that period in a lot of ways. So my back's starting to hurt, so I really we're going for a few more minutes, and then I'm gonna have to go rest. Yes, I might look young, and I am 28, but I'm kind of also 70 at the same time. Have you heard of Jason Giorgiani? Yes, but I can't recall anything about who he is. Remind me, because I've heard that name a lot of the time. Let's see here. Junaid, hi. Did you see the drawing I made for you? No? I don't think so. Where did you send that to me somewhere? I would love to take a look at it. If you can send it to me in an email, perhaps. My email address is on the About page on my channel. You can send it over if you want me to look at it. Mu'taz Dawood, why were Al-Ghazali's ideas so controversial? They weren't that controversial. I think in a lot of ways it was the opposite. He is one of the most appreciated figures in Islamic history. The way, in the way that he took Sufism, for example, and in works like the Ihya al-Ulumuddin, he makes, I wouldn't say a synthesis, because that overemphasizes the difference between Sufism and other aspects of Islam, but he created a kind of a way of looking at those things that was very appealing and to a more sort of orthodox perspective, and really made he became the mainstream for a number of centuries, essentially. He's really only become controversial lately because of many misunderstandings about his stance on science and things like that. That he ended the Islamic Golden Age, which is just not true at all. You'd think that perhaps the invasion of the Mongols and the complete destructions of all the great libraries and cities of the Islamic civilization would have played a perhaps more significant role than a single scholar who didn't really say anything that was all that controversial at all. But anyway. Toonie Stick asks if I was attacked by COVID-19. I had COVID 2 years ago. Can't believe I'm talking about COVID. I'm sick of talking about COVID, but I had it 2 years ago. Like right at the beginning. I lost all smell and taste for 2 months, and then had this thing called, I don't remember the name, but it's this condition where everything tastes wrong and everything tastes terrible. And I had that for like almost, on and off for like a year, but now I'm basically recovered. I think, there's a lot of questions, and I the questions that you're asking right now that I'm not answering are questions that I've either already answered previously on this stream. So if you want to know the answer to the question, you can just rewind and watch, watch the earlier parts of the stream, or it's questions that I, want to keep private, or questions that I don't, for other reasons, don't want to touch. But I think I'm gonna call it there. We've been streaming now for an hour and a half. As always, I really enjoy talking to you guys. I hope my answers weren't too incomprehensible. I certainly enjoyed talking to a lot of you, and I really enjoyed also seeing some of my good friends in the chat, like Justin and Zevi and Andrew. So I hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and that next week is as great as it can be, and that you enjoyed my recent video also on astrology. No, I can't. I'm seeing a lot of interesting questions. I'm not gonna start answering questions. I'll have to do more live streams like this, perhaps next week, or in connection to releasing new videos, because I really enjoy talking to you guys, and I think that it's hard to reply to all your comments. I try to respond to comments the first few hours when a new video comes out, but then it becomes really difficult to answer all those comments. So this is a really great way to engage with you guys in a direct way, and I really enjoy that. So I'll try to do it more regularly. I can't promise anything, but I'll try to do that. So thank you all so much for showing up. Again, I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks, guys.